The galaxy was in chaos. The war between the Dracovian Empire and the coalition of free species had been raging for decades, and no end seemed in sight. The Dracovians, a race of powerful, dragon-like beings, were feared across the stars for their ability to command elemental forces. They had conquered countless worlds, bringing death and destruction wherever they went. In the midst of this endless conflict, Captain Elias Blake, a human soldier from the Coalition, was on a mission. His unit had been deployed to the war-torn planet of Jarrell, a world once home to thriving cities now reduced to rubble. The Dracovians had attacked, and there was little hope for the survivors. The Coalition had sent in a special team to rescue civilians and gather intelligence on the enemy's next move. Elias and his team moved cautiously through the ruins of what had once been a thriving metropolis. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and the hum of distant explosions. There were no signs of life, only the haunting echoes of a war that seemed to have no end. As they advanced deeper into the city, the ground beneath their boots cracked, and the faint sounds of something unusual reached Elias's ears. It was a cry, a desperate, high-pitched wail that cut through the stillness of the ruined world. "Did you hear that?" Elias whispered, stopping in his tracks. His team froze, their weapons at the ready. "I hear it," Lieutenant Ava Kane, his second in command, replied. "It's coming from that direction." She pointed toward a collapsed building in the distance. Without hesitation, Elias signaled to his team. They moved swiftly but quietly toward the source of the sound, taking cover behind debris as they approached. The cries grew louder, more frantic. Elias's heart raced. He had seen the horrors of war before, civilians slaughtered, cities burned, but this was different. These cries were not from humans. The team reached the collapsed structure, and what they saw made Elias pause. Amidst the wreckage, a group of baby dragons, small, fragile, and covered in soot, huddled together. Their scales shimmered in the dim light, a soft green hue that stood out against the desolation. The little creatures were terrified, their tiny bodies trembling as they looked up at the human soldiers. But it wasn't just the dragons that had caught Elias's attention. Near the babies lay a massive, wounded dragon, its body riddled with burns and cuts. It was clear that this creature had once been a force to be reckoned with, an adult dragon of the Dracovian species. Now, it was dying. The baby dragons cried again, their voices filled with fear and sadness. "Mommy is dying," one of them wailed, its voice cracking. "Please don't hurt us." Elias felt his chest tighten. He had always known that war was brutal, but he had never imagined something like this. These creatures, these dragons, were the enemy. They had been part of the force that had destroyed countless human colonies and worlds. And yet, seeing them now, so small and helpless, something in Elias's heart softened. "Captain, we can't waste time. The Dracovians could return any minute," Lieutenant Kane urged, her voice tense. Elias didn't respond right away. Instead, he crouched down, looking at the baby dragons. Their eyes were wide with terror, but there was something else there, to something familiar, fear. Just like the fear he had seen in the eyes of human children caught in the crossfire of the war. For a moment, the line between enemy and ally blurred. "We can't just leave them," Elias said softly. His voice was steady, but there was a hint of something deeper, compassion. Something rare in the galaxy, where war had hardened so many. "They're Dracovians. Elias, they're our enemies," Lieutenant Kane reminded him, her voice growing firmer. "We have a mission. We need to keep moving." Elias stood up and glanced at his team. They were all experienced soldiers, battle-hardened and used to making tough decisions. But this was different. These creatures were not enemies to be shot at, they were innocent. And for the first time in a long while, Elias felt something stir within him, empathy. "You heard them," Elias said, his voice low but determined. "They need our help. We're not leaving them behind." Lieutenant Kane looked at him, disbelief written across her face. "Captain, this is insane. We're risking lives to save lives," Elias interrupted. "I'm not going to let these babies suffer because of a war they didn't start. We'll take them with us." Kane opened her mouth to argue, but something in Elias's gaze made her pause. He was the leader, and when Elias made up his mind, There was no changing it. Fine, she said reluctantly, though her voice was laced with concern. But we need to be quick. We'll have to get them to safety before the Dracovians realize we're here. The team carefully approached the baby dragons, trying to avoid startling them. One of the babies, a small blue-scaled dragon with large, pleading eyes, let out a soft, pitiful sound as Elias gently reached down to scoop it up. The dragon stiffened for a moment, but then, sensing no immediate threat, it relaxed and nuzzled against him. "Don't worry," Elias whispered, his voice reassuring. "We're going to get you out of here." As he spoke, the wounded mother dragon gave a weak, mournful cry, her massive head lifting slightly. She looked at Elias with eyes filled with gratitude and pain. She knew she was dying, and she understood the gravity of the situation. "We need to move, now," Lieutenant Kane urged again, her voice growing more urgent. Elias nodded, carefully cradling the small dragon in his arms. The rest of the team followed suit, gathering the remaining baby dragons and preparing to leave. As they made their way back toward the extraction point, Elias couldn't help but glance back at the dying mother dragon one last time. He knew they couldn't help her, she was too far gone. But in that moment, Elias made a silent promise. He would not let her children suffer. Not while he had the power to do something about it. Little did Elias know. This decision, this simple act of mercy, would set off a chain of events that would shake the galaxy to its core. Elias couldn't shake the image of the baby dragons from his mind. Their eyes, full of fear and confusion, haunted him as he led his team through the ruined streets of Jarl. The sounds of battle were distant, but they still echoed in his mind. He was used to the noise of war, but something about today felt different. It wasn't just the dragons. It was the choice he had made. He had always been a soldier, trained to fight, to protect, and to win. But today, he had done something unexpected. Instead of fighting, he had chosen to save. He had chosen to protect creatures that had been part of the enemy, creatures that, until recently, he would have destroyed without a second thought. "Captain, we're nearly at the extraction point," Lieutenant Kane said, her voice cutting through Elias's thoughts. "We need to move faster. I'm picking up some unusual signals." Elias looked up, scanning the horizon. The city was still burning, but in the distance, he saw the faintest glow of an incoming Dracovian patrol. They would not be able to outrun them. His team was too exposed, and the baby dragons weren't the fastest of creatures. Elias had to think quickly. "We need cover, now," Elias ordered, his voice sharp and commanding. The team instantly reacted, taking up positions behind the nearest building. The baby dragons, still in their arms, let out soft whimpers of fear, sensing the danger. Elias looked at them, then at his team. "We can't make it to the extraction point with this many Dracovians closing in. I'm going to have to make a distraction. You get the dragons to safety." Kane shook her head. "Captain, you're not seriously." "I'm serious." Elias interrupted, his voice firm. "The baby dragons are a priority. You know that. I'll handle the rest." He didn't wait for a response. He knew that once he made up his mind, there was no stopping him. Elias moved quickly, keeping low. As he took a detour through the ruins of an old building, he knew there were weapons hidden in the building and abandoned military outposts that had been left behind when the coalition first arrived. It wasn't much, but it was enough. As Elias moved deeper into the building, the baby dragon settled into the arms of his team. Zorka, the small blue dragon, was especially weak, still trembling from the shock of everything that had happened. Elias's heart clenched as he thought about the creature. It was small, barely older than a hatchling, but it had already shown signs of extraordinary power. Zorka has strange energy. The shockwave it had released earlier could be the key to saving them all. But for now, it was weak, far too weak to defend itself or the others. Elias found what he was looking for, a small, old blaster rifle. It wasn't much, but it would be enough to draw attention. He attached a special pulse grenade to it, designed to create a massive flash of light and noise to disorient the enemy. It was the only chance they had to escape. He moved swiftly, staying out of sight, until he was in position. He aimed the rifle at a pile of debris in the distance, setting his sights on the Dracovian patrol. The moment he fired, the flash grenade went off, filling the area with a blinding light. The Dracovian patrol was momentarily disoriented, their weapons raised in confusion. Elias didn't wait to see the results. He immediately ran back toward his team, shouting, "Move, now!" His squad didn't hesitate. They dashed toward the extraction point, the baby dragons still held close. But as they reached the edge of the city, they found themselves facing a new challenge. A Dracovian warship had landed nearby, blocking their path to safety. It was an enormous craft, its sleek black hull glinting under the dim light of the planet's dying sun. The Dracovians had caught up far faster than Elias had anticipated. "This isn't good," Kane muttered, her eyes scanning the warship. "We're trapped," Elias cursed under his breath. The warship was heavily armed, and the chances of getting past it undetected were slim. But there was no time to turn back. "We fight our way through," Elias said, his voice steady. He knew it was a long shot, but it was their only choice. "We can't just charge in there," Kane argued. "We'll be slaughtered before we even get close." But Elias wasn't listening. He looked at the baby dragons, now wide-eyed and trembling. Zorka, despite being weak, had an unusual calm about it. The little dragon seemed to sense Elias's determination and reached out a tiny claw, touching his hand as if offering support. In that moment, Elias understood. Zorka might be small and vulnerable now, but it had untapped potential, something ancient and powerful inside it. Elias had seen the power of the dragons before, but this was something else. This was not just a creature of war. It was something more. "All right, listen up," Elias said, turning back to his team. "I have a plan, and we're going to need all of you. Kane, you're with me. The rest of you keep the baby dragons safe. No matter what." Kane gave him a doubtful look but nodded. "I trust you, Captain. But if this goes south, we're not going to get a second chance." Elias didn't respond. He focused on Zorka, who was now looking directly at him, its tiny chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. Elias had no idea how or why, but he felt a connection with the little dragon. Maybe it was the fact that Zorka was the key to everything. Maybe it was something more, something deeper than just survival. The team positioned themselves, taking cover behind what remained of a collapsed building. Elias and Kane moved into position, ready to make a final push toward the warship. And then, without warning, Zorka let out a soft, pulsing sound. Elias felt the ground beneath him tremble as if a great force was awakening. He turned to see the small dragon glowing, a faint blue aura surrounding it. The other baby dragons, still huddled in the arms of the team, looked on in awe. Zorka's eyes locked with Elias's, and suddenly, it all clicked. The prophecy, the one that spoke of a hybrid force, one that would unite humans and dragons, had never seemed real. But now, Elias was beginning to believe it. Zorka was no ordinary dragon. This was no mere child of the enemy. This was something powerful, something that could change the course of the galaxy. As Zorka's glow intensified, Elias felt a surge of energy fill the air, and the warship in front of them shuddered. Something in the atmosphere shifted. The power that Zorka was unleashing was unlike anything Elias had ever felt before. This is it," Elias whispered, his voice filled with awe. "This is our chance." As the light around Zorka grew brighter, Elias knew they were no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting for something greater, future where humans and dragons could live in peace. And the first step toward that future was about to begin. The strange glow from Zorka, the baby dragon, had not faded. If anything, it had only grown stronger, its aura spreading across the ground like the first rays of dawn breaking over a long, dark night. Elias stood frozen, his eyes wide, watching the creature with a mixture of disbelief and awe. In that moment, he knew that everything had changed. The prophecy, the legends of a dragon reborn, had never seemed real until now. Zorka's glow pulsed, casting an ethereal blue light over the ruins of Jarl. Elias felt it in his chest, the hum of something ancient and powerful. The small dragon wasn't just channeling some natural elemental force. It was tapping into a deep, primal energy. Elias had heard stories about the ancient dragons, those who could control the very elements fire, earth, air, and water. But Zorka wasn't like the others. There was something different about this little dragon, something that tied it not only to the dragons of old but to humanity itself. "Captain, we need to move," Kane shouted, snapping Elias out of his trance. "The Dracovians are regrouping. We're running out of time." The warship loomed ahead, its massive engines humming as it prepared to launch another barrage of deadly fire. The baby dragons, still in the arms of the other soldiers, looked up at Elias, their eyes wide with fear. Zorka's tiny form had stopped glowing, but its eyes locked onto Elias's, and for a split second, he could have sworn the dragon was communicating with him not through words, but through some shared understanding. This was the moment, Elias realized. The choice was his to make. "Zorka, can you help us?" Elias whispered, more to himself than to the dragon. To his surprise, the small creature stirred. Zorka's wings, delicate and fragile, unfurled just slightly, catching the wind. The energy around it flared again, but this time the pulse felt like a wave of power, building and building. Elias could almost hear it like a storm gathering strength. The Dracovian warship had noticed, its weapon swiveling toward the team. The moment of truth had arrived. Without hesitation, Elias raised his blaster, aiming it at the ground in front of the warship. He fired a few shots into the dirt, hoping to create some noise and give his team a chance to escape. It wasn't much, but it was enough to draw the Dracovians' attention away from the dragons for a moment. That was all they needed, a few precious seconds. "Go," Elias barked. "Move out." Lieutenant Kane didn't need any further prompting. She led the charge, her team following close behind, the baby dragons still cradled in their arms. Elias held his breath as he watched them move. The Dracovian soldiers were fast, and there was no telling how long they had before the enemy came back with full force. But just as Elias began to turn toward the warship to make another desperate attempt at distraction, he felt it, a blast of pure energy, so powerful it almost knocked him off his feet. Zorka, small as it was, had unleashed something far beyond its size, a force unlike anything Elias had ever experienced. The ground beneath them cracked and groaned, and the air vibrated with the intensity of the pulse. The Dracovians, who had been preparing their weapons to fire, froze. Their eyes widened in shock, their commands turning to confusion. Zorka's energy had not only stunned the warship, but also sent a shockwave through the air, disabling the Dracovian forces around them. The warship's shields flickered, then began to flicker more violently as Zorka's raw power clashed with the Dracovian technology. A hum of pure energy resonated across the field. Elias turned back just in time to see the shockwave ripple across the battlefield, sending the Dracovians scattering in all directions. The warship's weapons ceased fire, its systems overloaded by the surge of energy. It wasn't dead, but it was temporarily disabled enough for Elias and his team to make their escape. "Move now," Elias shouted again, this time with more urgency. The team didn't hesitate, running for the safety of the dense jungle on the outskirts of Jarrell's capital city. As they ran, Elias felt the earth beneath them tremble with each step. Zorka was still glowing, its small form pulsing with energy. It was as though the dragon itself was charging the air around them with the power to fight back against an entire empire. The human soldiers had never been in such a situation. They had been trained for combat, but they had never imagined they would be part of something so extraordinary. As they reached the edge of the jungle, Elias turned to check on the others. Lieutenant Kane was holding one of the other baby dragons, her face set in determination but tinged with awe. The other soldiers were similarly focused, their eyes darting nervously to the sky as they moved deeper into the cover of the trees. Elias knew they were not out of danger yet. The Dracovian forces would regroup quickly, and they would send everything they had to hunt down this new threat. But Elias wasn't worried about that. Not anymore. He glanced down at Zorka, still nestled in his arms. The little dragon was quiet now, its energy having drained from the earlier burst. But Elias could sense something in the creature, a spark of potential, something beyond just power. Zorka wasn't just a weapon. It was a symbol of hope, a symbol of change. "This is just the beginning," Elias whispered. Kane turned to him. her brow furrowed with confusion. "What do you mean?" Elias smiled, though it was tinged with the weight of the responsibility that now rested on his shoulders. "We've been fighting the wrong battle." She looked at him, puzzled. "What do you mean?" "We're not just fighting for survival," Elias said, his voice steady but filled with the conviction that had only just now begun to form. "We're fighting to reshape the galaxy. We've been taught to fear the Dracovians, to hate them. But Zorka, this little dragon, this is our chance to do things differently. We can't just keep fighting their war. We need to build something new, something that unites us all." Kane seemed to understand, her eyes widening as the weight of his words sank in. She had always known that the war against the Dracovians was about more than just victory. It was about the future of the galaxy. But now, Elias's words felt like the beginning of a new chapter, one where humanity might not just survive, but thrive. "You really think that's possible?" Kane asked, her voice quiet but full of wonder. Elias nodded, his gaze fixed ahead. "I do." As the team continued to move through the jungle, they heard the distant sounds of the Dracovian warship's engines restarting. But this time, it didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a beginning, a sign that they had taken the first step towards something bigger than themselves. And as Elias glanced down at Zorka, he felt a sense of determination fill him. The galaxy had never seen anything like this before. The humans had always been considered weak, insignificant in the grand scheme of the universe. But Elias knew something the rest of the galaxy did not. Humanity had a strength that no one could ever underestimate, and it was about to shake the galaxy to its core. Elias stood silently at the edge of the dense jungle, staring out at the horizon. The sounds of the Dracovian warship's engines echoed faintly in the distance, but he was no longer concerned with it. His mind was focused on something much larger, something much more important. Zorka, the tiny dragon that had changed everything, was nestled against him, its soft breathing calm now that the surge of energy had faded. The other baby dragons, though still shaken by the recent events, were also quieter now, their eyes watching Elias with a mix of trust and awe. He had no idea what had happened to Zorka, or why it had been able to release such an incredible burst of energy. But one thing was certain, they had crossed a line. There was no going back. "They'll come for us," Lieutenant Kane said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of the situation. She stood beside Elias, her gaze fixed on the distant warship that loomed over the battlefield. "The Dracovians won't forget what we did here. This is just the beginning. They won't stop until they've wiped us out." Elias nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. The Dracovians were not just a military power, they were an empire built on domination. They had conquered countless worlds, leaving devastation in their wake. And now, humanity had become a target. Not just any target, though. With Zorka as power, they had become something far more dangerous. "We have to be ready," Elias said, his voice low but steady. "The Dracovians will come, but we can't just wait for them to strike. We need to make our move." Kane turned to look at him. "What do you mean?" Elias turned toward the team, gathering the baby dragons in his arms. Their tiny forms seemed so fragile, yet Elias felt a deep sense of responsibility for them. It wasn't just about survival anymore. The dragons, and especially Zorka, were the key to something greater, something he couldn't yet fully understand, but something that would change everything. "We've been fighting a war of survival," Elias continued, "but we need to fight for something bigger. These dragons, Zorka, they're part of something ancient. The prophecy of the dragon reborn, the one the Dracovians spoke of. It's not just a legend. It's real. And Zorka is the key." Kane raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "A prophecy? You're saying that this little dragon is the one they've been talking about? The one that's supposed to change the galaxy?" "I don't know," Elias admitted, "but I've seen enough to believe it. Zorka has powers no one has ever seen before. The Dracovians think they've wiped out the last of the dragons, but they don't know what's coming. We have to protect Zorka, keep it safe, and bring the prophecy to life. We can't let the Dracovians control the future." Kane was quiet for a moment, processing his words. Finally, she nodded. "So, what's our plan?" "We gather support," Elias said, looking out at the distant jungle. "We can't fight this battle alone. The coalition of free species will have to stand with us. And the dragons, they're going to have to unite with humanity, just like the prophecy said. We're going to need all the allies we can get. It wasn't a perfect plan. Elias knew that. The coalition was made up of many species, and their unity was fragile. But the one thing they all had in common was their desire for freedom. And if Zorka was truly the dragon reborn, then it wasn't just a matter of winning the war, it was about changing the course of history. As Elias spoke, the team moved into action. They had to get to the coalition's nearest stronghold, a distant planet on the far side of the galaxy. It was their only chance at rallying the forces they needed to stand against the Dracovians. And it wasn't going to be easy. The journey would take them through dangerous space sectors, territories controlled by the Dracovians and other hostile forces. But they didn't have a choice. If they stayed on Jor-El, they'd be sitting ducks, and the Dracovians would be on them within hours. The team moved swiftly through the jungle, keeping a low profile. They couldn't afford to be spotted. Zorka was still fragile, its energy depleted from the earlier display of power. Elias knew they had to protect the baby dragon at all costs. He couldn't help but feel that Zorka was more than just a symbol, it was a beacon. A sign that the galaxy could be united against the Dracovian Empire. And maybe, just maybe, it was the spark humanity needed to rise above its past. The journey wasn't easy. The jungle was thick with alien wildlife, some of which weren't friendly. But Elias's team had been through worse. They had fought in countless battles, faced dangers no one else could imagine. And yet, something about this mission felt different. It wasn't just about war anymore. It was about building something new, a future where the galaxy could live in peace. United by the strength of humanity and the dragon's dot as they neared the edge of the jungle, Elias felt a shift in the air. Something was coming. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and the sky above seemed to darken with a sense of foreboding. It wasn't just the Dracovians. There was something else at play, something far older and far more powerful. Elias looked down at Zorka, whose tiny eyes were wide with fear. He reached out, gently placing his hand on the little dragon's head. The creature looked up at him with an unspoken understanding, as though it knew what was coming. "We're not alone, are we?" Elias muttered to himself. Just as he spoke, the distant sound of engines filled the air. It wasn't the sound of Dracovian ships. It was something different, something ancient. "Get down!" Elias shouted. The team quickly dropped to the ground, taking cover behind trees and rocks. Elias's heart pounded in his chest as the sound grew louder. Whatever it was getting closer. And then, through the trees, they saw it. A massive figure, larger than anything Elias had ever seen before, soared across the sky. Its wings, vast and covered in shimmering scales, cast a shadow over the jungle below. The creature was enormous, far larger than any dragon they had encountered. It was unlike anything Elias had seen before, and it moved with a grace that defied its size. "This is it," Elias whispered. "The ancient dragons. They're real." The creature landed with a deafening roar, shaking the ground beneath them. And then, from the darkness of the jungle, a voice echoed, deep and commanding. "Human, you have awakened the prophecy. You will not stand alone." Elias's heart skipped a beat. The galaxy had just changed forever. The massive dragon landed with a force that made the ground tremble beneath Elias's feet. Its wings unfurled, casting a dark shadow over the jungle. The creature was unlike any dragon he had ever seen. Its scales gleamed like dark, polished obsidian, and its eyes glowed with an ancient power. The air around it seemed to hum with energy, as though the very atmosphere was alive with the weight of its presence. Elias's heart pounded as he stepped forward, feeling both awe and fear. The creature was enormous, far larger than any of the dragons they had seen before. Its gaze locked onto him, and for a moment, everything else faded away. The jungle, the team, the war, it all seemed distant, as if nothing else mattered but the ancient dragon in front of him. "You are the one they call Elias." The dragon's voice rumbled, deep and resonant, echoing through the clearing. "Human, you have awoken the prophecy." Elias swallowed hard. He had heard the legends, the ancient stories of dragons who once ruled the galaxy, beings of unimaginable power who had been lost to time. He had never believed them to be true. But here, standing before him, was living proof that the ancient dragons were not only real, they had returned. I don't understand, Elias said, his voice shaky. The prophecy. I didn't mean to. You have not merely awakened the prophecy. Human, the dragon interrupted. You have become its catalyst. The dragon reborn has emerged, and you along with Zorka are the key to its fulfillment. Elias glanced down at Zorka, who was still nestled in his arms. The small dragon's eyes were wide, filled with both fear and wonder. It seemed to sense the importance of the moment, and it pressed closer to Elias, as if drawing strength from his presence. The prophecy speaks of a time when dragons and humans would unite, the dragon continued, its voice filled with a quiet power. Together, they would stand against the tyranny of the Dracovian Empire, bringing an end to their reign of destruction. You, Elias, have made the first step toward that future. Elias felt a chill run down his spine. This was the moment he had feared and hoped for. The future of the galaxy rested on his shoulders. The Dracovians would not simply let this prophecy unfold. They would do everything in their power to stop it. Why now? Elias asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Why are you revealing yourselves to us now? The dragon's gaze softened slightly, though its ancient power still radiated from it. The Dracovians have awakened something they cannot control. They believe they can crush you, destroy humanity, but they do not understand what is at stake. The prophecy has been hidden for millennia, waiting for the right time to emerge. That time is now. Elias's mind raced. The Dracovian Empire, with all its power and ruthless ambition, would not take kindly to this revelation. If they found out that dragons, beings of unimaginable strength, had returned, they would stop at nothing to eliminate them. And now, with Zorka as the dragon reborn, the stakes were higher than ever. The galaxy was teetering on the edge of a new war, one that could either bring freedom or total annihilation. We must move quickly, Elias said, his mind snapping into action. The Dracovians won't sit idly by. They'll come for us with everything they have. You are right, the dragon agreed, its massive wings folding against its body. The Dracovians will not rest until they have destroyed what they fear. But you, Elias, have more than just the power of the dragons on your side. You have the power of unity. The galaxy is full of species who have suffered under Dracovian rule. You must unite them under one banner. Only then will you have the strength to stand against the Empire. Elias nodded, understanding the weight of the task ahead. The prophecy had spoken of unity, but he hadn't realized how crucial that would be. The galaxy's free species, those who had suffered under Dracovian tyranny, would need to come together if they had any hope of overcoming their oppressors. But it wouldn't be easy. The Dracovians had spent centuries dividing and conquering, breaking any alliances that threatened their power. To unite the galaxy, Elias would have to build trust where there had been none before. We'll do it, Elias said, his voice firm. We'll unite the galaxy. We'll take the fight to the Dracovians and end their reign once and for all. The dragon nodded, its ancient eyes reflecting a sense of approval. You are stronger than you know, Elias, but you are not alone. We will fight with you. As the dragon spoke, Elias felt a strange, yet comforting sensation, like a wave of strength flowing through him. It was as if the ancient dragon was lending him its power, guiding him toward the path of victory. For the first time in a long while, Elias felt a sense of hope. The impossible might just be within reach. The team gathered around Elias, each of them looking to him for guidance. Kane, still holding one of the baby dragons, stepped forward. What now? She asked, her voice steady but full of uncertainty. How do we start? Elias turned to face her, his gaze filled with determination. We'll gather allies. We'll reach out to the Coalition and all the free species who've suffered under Dracovian rule. Together, we'll build an army that can take the fight to the Dracovians and show them that we will not be intimidated. The Coalition is fractured, Kane pointed out. Many species are distrustful of each other. They've been fighting their own battles for years. Elias met her gaze. Then it's time to remind them of what we're fighting for. Freedom, unity. A future where they are no longer ruled by fear. The dragon, hearing their words, stepped forward once more. There is no time to waste. The Dracovians are already aware of your actions. They will strike soon. But you, Elias, and the Dragon Reborn have the power to change the course of this war. Use it." With those words, the dragon turned its gaze toward the horizon, where the distant glow of the Dracovian fleet could be seen. The time for hiding was over. The battle for the galaxy had begun. As Elias and his team prepared to leave the jungle and head toward their next mission, Elias felt the weight of what lay ahead. The road would be long, and the challenges would be many. But for the first time in his life, he truly believed that humanity and the dragons could rise together, stronger than ever before. The Dracovians would soon learn that no empire, no matter how vast, could crush the will of those who fought for freedom. The galaxy was about to change forever.